what do you think happens, your operating assumption for the future of Britain? We don't know what's going to happen, but you have to decide for yourself. Do I think Britain's going to stay? In other words, not respect the mandate of the referendum, maybe kind of muddle through with Europe, or perhaps there'll be something more disorderly?
My own view is that it's unlikely that Britain will actually exit, because when it becomes clear that the terms of the exit are so expensive, not only because the EU is demanding expensive terms, but also the consequences of leaving are so significant that I think the next Prime Minister of England will probably not invoke Article 50. In my view, this will take maybe a year or two to play itself out, but in my view, the consequences will be too severe. For example, if Scotland has a vote to exit, Scotland has the North Sea oil, Scotland has the nuclear submarine bases, and Scotland is a very important part of the UK. If they were to exit, it would not be a good thing for Britain.
And then surely Northern Ireland would want to follow suit.
Absolutely. So,
not so Great Britain any longer.
Remember, it'd be Little Britain. 52-48 vote. Democracy doesn't say that whenever you have a majority, that absolutely requires you to do something. So in our Constitution, for example, if you want to get a treaty approved by the Senate, it takes 2/3. If you want to amend the Constitution, it takes 2/3 of each House and 3/4 of the states. So it's not exactly the case that that a 52-48 vote means you have to do something. This was not a binding vote. Whether the Prime Minister regretted it or not, that's another issue. But I think in the end, the next Prime Minister of England, I think, will take a hard look at it. They'll assess the terms. My own view, obviously not based on inside information, my own view and based on general knowledge is it's unlikely that Britain will actually exit in 1 or 2 years. It may negotiate for a while, but in the end, I think the terms are going to be too expensive.
Many people are hopeful, David, that you're right. But let's, for argument's sake, say that you're wrong and Britain does leave
I have been
the EU.
wrong before in my life, yes.
Would that make Carlyle inclined to do less business or reduce its presence in the UK or Europe, for that matter?
The devil is always in the details. So what are the terms of the exit? We don't know. They're probably going to be expensive. I think some of the large banks might have to make changes in what they do in terms of their operations. I don't really know yet what the terms of the exit are, so I couldn't say what we would do. But I'm reasonably optimistic that Britain will in the end come to its senses, or the government leaders will come to their senses and recognize that a Brexit is not in anybody's interests.
How do you think financial markets, prediction markets, and for that matter, just about every established leader in Europe and elsewhere for that matter, got it wrong on Brexit?
Well, it is interesting that the polling firms, the betting operations, the leaders, nobody really got it right. Maybe that's because there's a shift at the very last minute, maybe in the last hour or two or a couple of days before the vote, there was a big shift. Maybe because people were just too distant from the people who actually did the voting. Many of the people who voted against it were in parts of England that a lot of the leaders don't actually spend a lot of their time in. So there may be many factors. It does make one wonder about the polling system in England, because they got it wrong on Cameron's election. They didn't really predict he was going to have an overwhelming victory. But we are where we are, and I think the most important thing to do is to not panic, not say that the world's falling apart. The world will survive this. This is not something that's going to happen overnight and all of a sudden have a calamity. It's going to take a long time before we know what the consequences are. And I think already we've seen a rebound in the market. The markets are coming back a bit. They're not back to where they were, but they're coming back a bit as people realize it's a long-term operation before we know what's going on.
Does it make you, David, do anything differently as the co-CEO of Carlyle, or the firm do anything differently, because the uncertainty that we've been living with already now seems to be deeper and maybe more prolonged? And that can create challenges as an asset manager, but opportunities as well.
There's no doubt that there's probably going to be a slowdown in the UK economy, and we have to take that into account as we look at companies we want to buy there. We have to assume that the economy is going to grow at a lower rate, and perhaps it makes some difference in financing things. We don't know yet. But we should also take a look at around the world. Are there any other Brexits that could happen? Are we assuming that something won't happen, that it might actually happen? So I think a geopolitical assessment of other possible Brexits around the world is a good thing to do.